The purpose of this story was to talk about the impact of Pelé's death in Santos. And I was at my mother's house in her apartment, which, interestingly, was just a few meters from Pelé's statue. At Canal 5, suddenly, my mother comes into the room and says, "Pelé has died." The editor on duty already called me. "Plácido, you're closing the Journal National story on the reaction in Santos, so get to Villa Belmiro now." I said, "But how? You expect my live reports with more info and accounts." The coordinator's answer was quite telling. He said, "No one has ever covered Pelé's death before, so we don't know either." When I decided to write the book, it was very much because I had my father as a reference. And my father had a stroke. So, on medical advice, he started writing everything down in notepads. A poem, a reminder. Tomorrow I need to buy bread at such and such time. I found that both amazing and chaotic at the same time, and I've always liked detective and mystery stories. I thought, hey, I think I can somehow create a character inspired by this trait of my father.
In the signing line, people want to take a picture with the writer or with the reporter. The episode is starting, it's amazing, but first I have an important message. We noticed that 81% of the people who watch in 3 acts are not subscribed to the channel. It's a simple gesture for you, it doesn't cost anything, you just have to press a button. Now, but for me it's very important, it makes all the difference. So here's my request. Subscribe to the channel and share this episode with someone you think will like it. Hold on, the episode is about to start, but I have just one more message for you. If you want to study with me, take all my courses and also get live mentoring every month on Zoom. Come join the Jornada Club. All the details are here in the video description. Go check it out, then let's get to the first act. At 67 years old, a retired journalist realizes he's losing his memory and starts doubting everything he sees and hears. And even so, he believes he witnessed a crime by the sea. But is that really what matters in his unsettling existence? After all, is the investigation about the crime or about his own life? Francisco Solano lives in Copacabana and he is not my guest today, well, because Francisco Solano doesn't exist. He's a fictional character created by my guest. Now, my guest is a real person, flesh, bone, and soul, who, by narrating the story of this fictional Francisco, exposes his deepest and most existential questions, and brings us a fiction that is at the same time both trivial and philosophical, which is as paradoxical as the crazy normality that the title speaks of. In today's program, we're going to talk about literature, but also about incredible human experiences, about a restless journalist who has lived in England, in Kenya, and is now back in Brazil. My guest likes adventures, writes without embellishments, and goes around trying to understand my craziness, yours, and so many others. Plácido, Berci, come on in. I'm going to die. Well, it's good that you're here, thank you. Make yourself at home.
Can I leave it on the table?
Leave it here on the floor. And your books, oh yeah. Did you learn from your friend Ednei Silvestre that a writer always carries books?
Oh, of course, you never know when you'll get an opportunity out there.
He told you that?
Didn't he?
Ednei said that when I met him at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2014, when we really got to know each other, he said it. A writer always has to bring his books. And are you bringing yours?
I always have them in my backpack.
You never know if someone might come by who you'd want to give the book to, right?
And it's also so the person doesn't have an excuse. Sometimes you meet someone on the street, you explain the story. Oh, I'll buy it, but that's not a problem. I have it right here.
You sell it?
Oh, of course.
Man, I never had that idea before.
All the time. Especially because Luca Normalidade, for example, is a book from an independent publisher, so the distribution ends up not being so wide, let's say. Always keep it handy so the person can't make excuses.
How does this process of making an independent book work?
I have 3 published books. 2 are reportage books, and this is my first fiction. The processes were quite different from each other.
They weren't with the same publisher.
The first one has already been published by 2 different publishers. Paixão, A Journey Through English Football, which was from the time I lived in Manchester between 2014 and 2015.
I'll add what you said about the other two. I want info on this one.
Yeah, just about the publication issue. The first one was crowdfunding. We used Qatar's, a crowdfunding website, and then I had a goal to reach. With that money, we were able to make it happen, and then it was a publisher from Rio via Escrita. After 2020, this was 2015 publication in 2020, we relaunched Pi Show with another publisher specialized in soccer, and this time independently.
Relaunched it because it went well and was cool.
It went well. And also here in Brazil, there wasn't any other book that ended up being successful. About English football, which is a topic that's really growing in Brazil, the interest in the Premier League has increased a lot. There are a lot of people who follow English football here in Brazil. So it ended up doing well. And then in 2020, we relaunched it with this publisher, which basically used a crowdfunding process, which is pre-sale, just like we did with Luca Normalidade.
I took part in this new one, yes.
In fact, you bought 4 books.
Thank you. I'm a writer. I know that writers need to be encouraged, right?
Right?
But I haven't received it yet, no.
Hey, it hasn't arrived, no.
It hasn't arrived, no?
So then it arrived for me.
One that you sent signed, which I have here actually. Let's take a look and show it, but the 4 from the publisher haven't arrived yet. Could it be that maybe they have the wrong address? Luca Normalidade, yes, you released it at Flip.
I released it at Flip in Parity. I had never been to Parity before. The first time I went, I was already going to Flip. It was a really intense experience, really cool, you know? An explosion of culture, constantly learning and talking about history. It was really intense.
But in the signing line, people want to take pictures with the writer or with the reporter.
Yeah, I think it was more with the writer. It was, I work with sports, right?
Do you think you've already managed to make a name for yourself as a writer because of this book?
Because of this book? No, it's very recent, isn't it?
I say this because it's the first fiction. The others take a different approach.
Yes, but that's interesting because the way the audience approaches, let's say, to take a picture in that moment of affection, like a certain admiration, usually comes more from people who have read my books than from the audience who sees me on television. That's really crazy from the very start.
It was quick.
So yeah, people, it's because I think reading, you know this very well, creates a connection.
First, we have an incredible coincidence, a few actually. First, the fact that we lived outside Brazil, worked as correspondents, as journalists. But I also first wrote 2 memoirs, based on trips that...
I took travel accounts, right?
How did you do it? Yes, and then I said no. Now I want to write a deeper book. I'm going to do research for the first time for a book, write a book from scratch. Yes. Is that what you did in Luca Normalidade? That's right. But what about this story of the first one, just so I understand? The story of the independent publishing, how does that work?
So in this case, the pre-sale works like a crowdfunding campaign. You also have a goal to reach, and with that amount, you can make the publication possible. It only prints
if enough people say,
if the goal is reached, exactly.
If not, refund the money.
Yeah, but then the author usually ends up covering what's missing, let's say, right? It ends up happening. But then what sets an independent publisher apart, besides that compared to the bigger publishers, is really the matter of promotion and distribution.
Which is how it depends more on you, right? Being independent.
For sure. So, for example, the second book, which is Nuvem de Terra, which was about the time in Kenya, that one was published by Globo Livros. So I never had to worry about distribution. I kept it in my backpack since I'm shameless, but it was released.
From the beginning?
From the beginning by Globo Livros. It was Globo Livros, yeah.
I also had books there, several.
And it's great.
My first bestseller was with Globo Livros. It was the book Aparecida.
It was Aparecida. That's when you got into it, right?
Was that when I started? It was when I met Ednei in Frankfurt. In 2014, I was launching Aparecida at that time. Another coincidence in my journey.
I'm really happy about the invitation because I admire you a lot. Thank you.
Man, it's great to have you here. Really great to have you here. I've been following you even more since our soccer game with Lázaro Ramos, who turned out to be a terrible soccer player just like me.
Terrible soccer skills. Questionable, really.
But you play, right?
I play. Kind of. I fake it. I went viral a while ago. In 2023, at the end of 2023, scoring a free kick goal during a broadcast.
During a broadcast? What do you mean?
I was there as a reporter during the Sport TV broadcast at the end of year friendly match that the players do, right? And well, there aren't many rules, right?
You playing together with the professional players? No, as a reporter. Oh, just as a reporter. And you went onto the field and played and then...
The organizer of the match was Narciso, the midfielder who played for Santos, made history at Santos, and also became well known because he recovered from leukemia and returned to play soccer. He retired a long time ago in 2004 or 2005. So I was at Narciso's match covering it. It's already a pretty traditional end of year game in the Brazilian soccer calendar. Then Narciso wanted to take a free kick, so I started messing around there.
It was being broadcast live.
Live during the pregame, I spoke to him and he said, "No, we'll get a free kick. Don't you want to take a penalty?" And then years ago, Felipe Diniz, another journalist from Globo, today he hosts Troca de Passos on Sport TV. He was also a reporter during Narciso's broadcast and took a penalty, hit the crossbar, and then Narciso. When I asked to take the free kick, he said, "Don't you want to take a penalty like Felipe Diniz did years ago?" I said, "Narciso, but think about it. If I take an easy penalty, I'm just doing my job. If I miss, it looks bad, like it did for Felipe, it's true. The free kick, nobody expects anything. If I miss, it's fine, but if I score a goal, I make history for your."
And you did, and
I did, and then it went viral. It was a great goal. Yeah, it was beautiful.
there was a wall, there was.
There was. Some say the goalkeeper allowed it, but I disagree.
No, I'm going to ask to show that goal so we can see it online and on social media.
Okay, and people in the comments can decide if the goalkeeper allowed it or not.
I don't doubt it.
I don't think he let it in.
Did you ever think about becoming a player?
I thought about it, but I didn't have any talent.
I wasn't there in the middle. Right there. I could have been good. For a pickup game, but not professionally, no.
Very average.
Why do you call yourself a dreamer?
I think it really comes from the way my parents raised me. I'm an only child, and my parents are both from the sciences. My father was a chemist, a chemistry teacher, a university professor. Pedro Vaz Filho, yes? And he was a very cultured man with a very wide range of interests, skills, and knowledge. My father was quite a guy, exceptional.
The profile of the dreamer, at least in theory, is an engineer.
No, he was a chemist. My mother was a civil engineer and also a physicist. But interestingly, talking to them, I even talk a bit about this in Luca Normalidade because there's a role reversal. In the story, the protagonist is a journalist and the son is a chemist. And then there's a dialogue that I put between the two. There, I learned a lot from my parents that especially physics and chemistry are also quite abstract, right? We think it's very black and white, but actually you need a lot of imagination to visualize the protons.
And they're existentialist, right? Both physics and chemistry deal with questions that also lead to our existence. The discovery of big bangs, of cells, of many things. These discoveries are connected to things related to our own existence.
Humanity, right?
It makes perfect sense, right? It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it's curious, right? Because it's not something we connect right away, but
But was your father a chemist then?
my father was a chemist.
Humanist.
Too much of a humanist. You know, my aunt, his sister, Aunt Annie, is a doctor, and it's interesting. She always told me, especially after his passing, when I started to look more into his story and talk to family members, my aunt said she thought my father would be a writer or poet. When? When he decided on chemistry, nobody understood, and he explained. My father, as I said, he was a guy with an aptitude and a real interest in everything, really. He was a guy who read all of Freud's works, read Churchill's works in English. He gave me like a gift.
So he was a very intellectual person.
He's the smartest person I've ever met, really. He was way above average.
Yeah, and he shaped you and he shaped me.
Really, especially instilling in me this sense of curiosity as something fundamental and making me believe that anything is possible. So I think that's where the dreamer in me comes from. My first hero in journalism was Tintin, whom I watched with him when I was about 5 years old. Tintin, the reporter created by Hergé, right? Belgian cartoonist, and Tintin, basically in the stories, he traveled the world fighting crime and having adventures. So I think my idea of journalism actually starts from there, from having adventures.
You're talking about Tintin. I was just daydreaming here, remembering that in French, and Belgians also speak French, it would be Tintin, which for us is crazy. It's
Which is the
title of your book.
Yeah, that's true.
It's Luca Normalidade. I picked out a few excerpts here. If you allow me, I'll read them. Copacabana is not for beginners. Before taking a shower to get rid of the sea air and clear his head, he opens the nightstand drawer and puts away the newly written notepad. If the drawer is full, he takes out the notepads in the back with old notes and puts them in a box. Inside the wardrobe, the new manuscripts stay on top in the drawer. This is how his memory mechanism works. I wanted to get into the book. It's a book about an internal search. There's an investigation of a crime, but there's something existential and philosophical that runs alongside the story.
I enjoyed listening and felt flattered to hear your presentation and talk about the philosophical question because I think there's a lot of it. It's something I also tried to study a bit during the writing process, and I was kind of lost, especially after his passing, which ended up spanning 2 years, no, a little less, a year and a half of writing, after the morning or with the morning. And at the time, I was really reflecting on everything. So, hearing you say that it has this philosophical air makes me happy because the goal was achieved.
It matches how you felt then very much.
Yes.
But you started writing before your father's death, right?
Before,
It took you 7 years to write the book.
yeah, I usually say it was 5 years of writing and 2 years of refining until I found a publisher to publish it. So it was 2 years where I didn't stop working on the text, right?
When you say writing, you mean actually putting your fingers on the keyboard and writing. Yes.
Because like it was 5 years until the moment when I boom finished the story, the end.
Are you the kind of writer who, in those first 2 years of writing, already had the whole plot in your head? Or did you have loose ideas and when you sat down, that's when you started organizing them?
I knew what I wanted to say, but it was also a process. A process that even involved a lot of therapy along the way, but it was a process of understanding what the true message was. And now I'm already explaining. So, after thinking a lot about the book, I think it basically talks about three themes: mental health, family relationships, and aging. At first, when I decided to write the book, it was mainly because I had my father as an intellectual and loving reference. My mother, too, so she wouldn't feel left out.
Yeah, I also wanted to remember your mother.
Mrs. Fatima might get jealous, but both of them are fundamental. It's just that this book
Mrs. Fatima, there you are.
and this one was specially sent when they asked me for some photos because it's an achievement of ours, right? The book was published and my father is no longer physically here with us, but in a way, he even looks like the man on the cover. This photo to me is like the three of us are together.
Oh, because your father is here.
In a way,
Francisco Solano is 67 years old. He's a retired journalist and he's 67 years old, the same age as your father.
it's the same age he was when he passed away.
He shares your profession.
Yes.
He lived in Ghana.
No, he went through Ghana. He lived in Kenya, which is where I lived.
He also lived in Kenya.
Francisco lived.
Just like you lived, yeah. The book creates a symbiosis between you and your father.
Yes. I would say the protagonist is about 80% my father, about 15% Plácido, and about 5% Grandpa Pedro, who was his father. Oh yeah, there's a little bit of Grandpa Pedro in Francisco Solano, Chiquinho Canastra. In the story, he liked to play cards. That was from my grandfather.
You said that you were in analysis during the time you were writing the book. Do you think that in some way you were actually trying to connect with your father through the words in the book?
Yes, and actually, I ended up not answering your previous question. This thing about answering is hard for a journalist. We're used to the opposite. And I think that, well, I wanted to write about him, about our relationship and everything else. And then my father had a stroke, just like Francisco Solano. And on medical advice, he started writing everything down in notepads.
That relates closely to the passage I read here.
This is really a characteristic he had after the stroke, which happened in 2014. My father retired from USP. He stopped being a university professor because of the stroke. And then at the time, the neurologist said, start writing everything down, even if it doesn't make sense, because it will help you not to forget things. Because it was a hemorrhagic stroke. He had severe aphasia. It affected his language and memory. And then I said, well, this already gives me an interesting storyline because I saw him writing things down and he wrote down everything. It was really curious. It was really crazy, honestly, to see my dad writing everything down. He would write down a poem, a reminder like, tomorrow I need to buy bread at such and such time, schedule the ophthalmologist, which is even a note that appears in the book. He really wrote down everything, and I thought that was both incredible and chaotic at the same time. And I've always liked detective and mystery stories. I thought, hey, I think I can somehow create a character inspired by this trait of my father
While he was alive,
while he was alive. And I started writing this in 2018, right after I published Nuvem de Terra, which was this book about Kenya. At the time, I should have gone to therapy when I came back from Kenya, but I didn't. The book helped me, and I thought, wow, writing helped me process important, intense things that I had experienced during my travels. I think it's time for me to try to work through things a bit too. Very intimate experiences, but not in nonfiction. Since they're so intimate, I'm going to disguise them in fiction. And then I started.
To disguise, that's the word.
I think so, because there's a lot of reality in it, but it's disguised.
Camouflaged means disguised, but it eventually becomes clear because we realize you are in the book. I started having that feeling then.
And honestly, you barely know me.
No, but we get to know each other. We get to know each other. Plácido is here. Yeah, that's it. You saw yourself in the pages of the book. At some point, it ended up becoming a kind of mirror.
It did, and I think it starts being written with this story about the stroke. And my main goal at that time was to discuss the social prejudice against people who have after effects from a stroke or who behave outside the norm. And throughout the process, especially after his passing, I realized that actually it wasn't that. My father had a psychiatric disorder that wasn't properly diagnosed. He was even diagnosed with schizophrenia before I was born. For me, it's quite curious to be talking about this openly. I spoke about it openly for the first time at Flip during a panel, and it was really.
It's unnatural to talk about this.
I didn't talk about it, only to very few people in a very intimate setting, to close friends, girlfriends, to my mother. It was something we took a long time to talk about. For a long time, I got used to this unspoken thing about my father, this mystery about himself, and we ended up growing apart. At a certain point in my teenage years, which I guess is natural, in that phase of self assertion, of wanting to fit in with the standards, and even though he was my best friend, during my teenage years, I wanted to be popular. I wanted to please the status quo. So I tried to fit in somehow, avoiding some of his traits that weren't considered normal.
And that?
When he had the stroke, it really hit me hard. It was a moment of deep reconnection, and even feeling a bit guilty for having that shame, for not processing it, but also not making excuses for myself. But my therapist has already talked about this. He said, Plácido, you were 13, 14 years old. It's natural, it's hard. It would be strange if you were super mature at that age. But when I thought about it, I realized that the book wasn't really about social prejudice against stroke after effects, or social prejudice about psychiatric issues, or about behaviors outside the norm. And accepting that, and today, as an adult, seeing myself very similar to him in many ways. It's a very clear mirror, transparent, true, like, hey, accept yourself, understand your story, your family.
What are the similarities you see between you and your father?
This curiosity, kind of about everything, a certain chaotic way, but at the same time methodical.
Where is your chaotic side?
I think very fast and about a lot of things. I'm pretty anxious.
You keep switching thoughts.
I'm pretty anxious.
Rodrigo is.
He is, and very perfectionist, insecure, but at the same time very confident. My father was like that too.
You demand a lot, but that also brings results, right? It does.
Because you end up being very thorough, right? Going deep into things that maybe if I weren't such a perfectionist, I'd just say, oh, it's done, I've delivered it. And then you get a 5 or 6, and
On the other hand, it demands too much.
it demands a lot. And my father, he had a characteristic that, even though, as I said, my father was brilliant in many ways, and he lived in Atlanta, did his postgraduate studies at Emory University there. And when we talked about English, he would always say, hey, read this here. I'd say, Dad, you lived in Atlanta, speak, are a researcher, and write in English. And he'd reply, no, but your English is better than mine. He was also very deeply humble, and at times he would sabotage himself. So I also noticed myself sometimes having similar behaviors. No, but I won't sabotage myself like my dad did. I'm learning too, right?
Was his schizophrenia visible to you?
He had a very different behavior, you know? He's the kind of person that even before the stroke, anyone who met him would notice, hey, Pedrinho isn't normal. but he was a guy with a lot of stories and like a lot of knowledge. He would explain to you any subject you brought up, for example, even you. I want to ask you later about the time you spent in Jerusalem if you started talking about Jerusalem. He would know the history of the Jewish people and he would know about Jerusalem, like very peculiar, specific things that you would mention. But how does this guy know? Because he researched everything and stored it. It was a lot.
Ah, so the reality is that before the stroke, he had a lot of memory, a lot.
It's just that the stroke made it even more chaotic because then he would talk about this information, but you wouldn't necessarily catch the connection to why he said that, you know?
I set aside another part here. That doesn't mention anything about Spider-Man or Batman. During his first 12 years of life, Eduardo had Francisco Solano as his great hero. A hero without a cape, whose superpower was his unconditional affection for his son. An adult capable of diving into the most fanciful creations of the boy, imaginative and full of energy. Are you Eduardo?
90%. That's a lot.
Eduardo is a chemist.
And Eduardo is a chemist.
How was that process? I keep imagining because you started bringing your own characteristics to the main character and your father's characteristics to the character that represents you. There's a certain role reversal, and that must be difficult to manage. How did you build each of these characters? Did you have to stop and decide what the main character, Francisco Solano, would be like and what Eduardo would be like? Where am I here? Where am I here? Because what I realize and discover as I talk to you is that the book is really symbiotic. It's your life with your memories, with the story that you created, for example. They live in Copacabana, which has nothing to do with São Carlos, in the countryside of São Paulo, nothing to do with where you were born. How was the process of building these characters? I'm really asking from writer to writer about putting on paper a life that's formed by two other lives and more fiction. It's the same here with the father and son.
I have a theory, and after researching a lot about the creative process, about literary writing, there are people who disagree with this and say that not everything is autofiction. But I tend to think that everything is autofiction. I think Star Wars has a lot of the author in it. You know, so Luke Skywalker is just someone that George Lucas met at some point.
Do you think it's always like that?
I think it's hard to avoid Rodrigo because in the end, it's all about references, right? We can't write about what we don't know.
I'll just speak for myself to see if we share experiences. I wrote a novel called The First Immortal when I didn't have a good image for my character. I looked in my memory archive for people I had spent time with because that helped me. And then sometimes I would fit it in like, oh, this phenotype, this body type here, this matches the guy I'm talking about. And then I used that reference, but from a person I knew, not necessarily someone who influenced me in any way in life. Oh, I see. It could have been a salesman, a taxi driver.
Adapting a conversation you overheard to your story?
The conversation, not so much, but the images of the people, I was always looking for them. Because instead of creating like a computer does, choosing a nose, choosing an eye, it was easier for me to say no. I remember that Frenchman I spent some time with, and this character of mine is French. They have these characteristics, so I bring a bit of him, but when I start writing, of course, he changes. But that didn't make my book autobiographical. Yes, it made my references, my memories mine.
Your database, the database.
To consult. But I also think it's natural that, as you yourself said, you wrote 2 travel memoirs. I did too. Yours was in Kenya, mine was in Haiti. Serious issues in both countries. I imagine you saw a lot in Kenya. I want to know. So it's natural, I believe, that at many moments we put ourselves into the book. But also, just because we're debating here, writer to writer, I believe it's possible, yes, to detach from the autobiographical and imagine.
I think it's possible. I'm already contradicting myself, but it's like this. I don't doubt that it's possible. I'll adapt. I don't doubt that it's possible, but I think maybe it's a second stage. And I've heard many people say that usually a writer's first novel is a bit autofictional. that you end up using this database more. And then with experience and practice, the exercise, the training, you really start to pick up things that are truly random and actually create.
Are you already thinking about the second one? I've already started. It's taking shape. There are already, some pages written?
There are. I started right after Flip. I had the idea during Flip without giving too many spoilers, but it's a thriller, so it's pure suspense. And then, interestingly, I started writing. Yeah, I was walking with my girlfriend at Flip. The idea came to me. I talked to her and said this. It would be cool to write a book that has nothing to do with me right now, just a book that I would like to read.
You're contradicting yourself right now.
It's true. Now I'm already trying to move on to the next step. Let's say it's true.
And it's moving forward, it's progressing. The book already has a main character.
Some things are still under construction. Because then, precisely because it isn't inspired by anything close to me, it's just a story that I find interesting that I would like to read, right? And it's been fun to write. It's a thriller with social satire. Basically, I'm a big fan of Rafael Montes, who's a really popular author. Yes, I'm reading Perfect Days right now during this interview, the book that inspired the Global Play series.
Great.
And he uses suspense and that kind of uncomfortable humor to talk about social criticism.
Do you also get the feeling when you're writing, I get this, it feels like nothing else matters? I mean, the most important thing in the world is what's happening inside the story.
So much more than what's really happening. It's fun, right?
It is, right?
For those who are watching us, who have never tried it, even if it's just for fun, give it a try because it's fun, it's cool.
So tell me, just so everyone can understand a little more, the story begins then with Francisco Solano at 67 years old. Yes, he has a stroke, loses his memory, he's in Copacabana, and he starts writing everything down. You're not going to tell everything, but tell us as much as you can. What can you tell us about what your book is about? You can tell us a little bit, there's no rush.
It's not the synopsis. I think it's just like you said, it's about a retired journalist who lives in Copacabana. And there's this background of a psychiatric condition that hasn't been properly diagnosed. And the stroke makes all his problems worse, and he has this medical recommendation to write everything down in notepads. And the story starts with him waking up in a tiny apartment, number 44 in the Lours building, and finding a note from the day before that he doesn't remember writing in a little notebook that's covered in dirt.
In other words, his memory doesn't even last 24 hours.
It faded, and then he gets bothered by that. It's a pretty nonsensical note. It doesn't make much sense. Things don't add up between the words written down. And there's also a numerical sequence there, 00KMF with an acronym, right? And then the story starts to unfold from this investigation, which he begins to pursue obsessively, but also very much connected to the anguish of whether or not to share it with those close to him, with his family members.
Can you say what the investigation is?
As for the investigation, we can anticipate that he suspects he witnessed the crime. And then, since he is a...
Especially because I had already said...
You also mentioned the presentation? No, but even the synopsis on the publisher's website already reveals it. And then he starts to investigate it, while he decides whether or not to tell the therapist, his ex-wife, his son, his grandson. He starts to investigate on his own, especially because his career was as an investigative journalist, and then in this process it was really interesting. Actually, the book is written in third person, the narration is in third person, but there are breaks into first person, which are the notes. And there it was a symbiotic exercise, really, like putting myself in my father's place to try to think like him, to write the notes there in a kind of chaotic way.
And did you manage to do it?
I think so.
Your mother said yes?
Yes, she didn't. I don't know if she finished the book yet. Actually, she started it. She said it was getting very emotional for her, so she took a break. But then, throughout these notes, the book starts to gain this more philosophical layer, let's say, right? And then, it's a classic mystery. Like I said, I really like stories, real mysteries, investigations. What happened ever since the books by Agatha Christie, the most classic ones. A guy I really like, who also inspired me a bit in this thing about Rio mysteries, Luis Alfredo Garcia Rosa, a guy who writes police mysteries in a way that I enjoy. So there's a lot of that story, the detective novel in a way, kind of noir, except the investigator is a retired guy, a bit messed up, as he himself says. He's insecure. And then there's even this question for us journalists, because a journalist lives off credibility, and he himself doesn't trust himself. So It's an investigation that lived with him, exactly. He thinks he saw it. But then, in the next chapter, he starts to have doubts. And then he tells the therapist a little bit, but then he regrets it, says he's joking, and then no one else knows what he's talking about. Man, Francisco is really crazy, isn't he? And throughout the story, there are some flashbacks, so we get to know a little more in depth about who Francisco is. So I also find it interesting what you mentioned here. In the end, it's an investigation about himself, right? There's the investigation about the note, but I think the main focus is the investigation about him.
Why do you think readers are enjoying the book? What are they finding that makes them interested in continuing and reaching the end of the book? That's it. It's this philosophical depth that you bring. It's your language, which is direct and straightforward, without embellishments, but still deep. Where do you think, based on the feedback you've been getting, your readers' interest lies?
I think it's been because of the language, really agile. And so I think that's an advantage we end up having because it's from television, right? And as a journalist, and specifically from television, we learn to be more objective, more concise, right? And very visual.
But from television, right? You and I were raised in television. There was, at the beginning of my career, a myth that television reporters didn't know how to write. And I always thought that was a lie, and I quickly found out that it was a lie. Because it's much harder to write well for television, but when you write well for television, it's because you've reached a very high level, because you have to be concise, and that's when we get to one of the values of writing, which is conciseness. So, do you try to bring elements of your television language into your book, or do you look for a different language?
I use it in a way even more in my other books. I think the language is more objective, with short sentences, very straightforward phrases, and more direct punctuation. I try to make some breaks in the chapters, which I even feel is a trend in contemporary Brazilian literature. And that was actually a suggestion from the publisher Mondro for us to break it up into smaller chapters.
It's not a paragraph, right? You mean...
Paragraphs too, but then paragraphs, I imagine you've been through this before. When you're really excited writing in that stream of consciousness, the paragraph gets really long, right? Yeah.
Saramago, for example, right?
I've never read Saramago, definitely a gap in my reading.
There are paragraphs that drag on for pages.
And that's a really bold choice, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean good or bad, right? It's a style, and you learn to navigate those pages in the way that writer leads you. I think there's as much quality in a short sentence as there is in a long one. It's a matter of choice. The story I want to tell and how I want to tell it, how I express myself.
I think all generalizations are dumb, Rodrigo. When we say no, the rule is like this, well, that's exactly when we start making mistakes.
Someone who used to say almost that was a great writer, Nelson Rodriguez, right? How did he say it? You who come from sports, he used to say, all unanimity is dumb.
Unanimity is dumb, it's true.
It's a great reference too, right? Someone who came from sports, he was a sports journalist.
Yes, in the chronicle style.
Right? Greatest Brazilian writers. I really like Nelson Rodriguez.
He wrote a lot of plays.
You mentioned several references from Brazilian literature. That's new to me because there's a generation gap between us, I'd say, right? About 15 years of difference.
You're 51, right?
51. When I started, I didn't have many people to turn to, at least not alive. The great Brazilian authors, forgive me, those who were alive at that time. I might be forgetting someone, but the great references in Brazilian literature were dead people, Machado de Assis and so on.
Clarice.
Yeah, but not anymore, right? You mentioned living Brazilian authors here. Do you notice a change? Is there a growth in literature in Brazil?
I don't know if it's growth, maybe because I'm 35. Maybe when you were my age, there were also some authors who were having some success. But you said no, right?
But for example, there wasn't anyone with as big an audience as Rafael Montes back then. I saw in one of your interviews, Madeira, Cala Madeira, I saw you mention Daniel Galera. He may not be a writer for the masses, but he's recognized as a great writer.
My main reference for the style of book I wanted to write is a book by Daniel Galera, a writer from Rio Grande do Sul, Blood-Drenched Beard, which is a book that already had its adaptation rights bought and sold. In this case, it's also a philosophical mystery.
Yeah, that's what I'm noticing. You bring a lot of references from Brazilian literature. It seems to me, it seems like this is a more recent phenomenon, being able to do that because there's a greater supply now.
I think so. Maybe it's a kind of school, right, that's taking shape here. Yes.
I wanted to come back to this. Well, first, before we move on, I wanted to know what photo is this here?
Ah, I didn't send this one. Was it your team or you who found it?
Yeah, there are investigators in your life, right? We sent a few spies to dig into your story. I'm curious. You said that at that time you were a good Christian? Uh huh. What happened? Are you not a good Christian anymore?
I don't see myself as a good guy now,
That's not it, no.
right? I think so. I'm a good guy in general. I'm a good guy. I have to be at least, but today I consider myself agnostic.
Oh, it was a matter of being connected or not connected to religion. I thought you were saying that here you were a good guy and then you stopped being a good guy.
No, no, that was irony. When I posted that photo, I think I put a caption like I tried to be a bit ironic there, but it's interesting because my upbringing, not at home, because my father said he was an atheist, but when he had the stroke, I was with him in the hospital. A priest came into the hospital room there at Santa Casa de San Carlos and asked if we wanted a prayer. I was already dismissing the guy since my father was openly atheist and couldn't even speak properly yet. He held my hand, this left hand, which is actually the right one. He didn't have any strength at the time. He wanted a prayer. Yeah, let the priest do it. And even after that, my father always had this thing. In the end, like sending me an audio message, he used to follow my work a lot, my broadcasts and all. He always sent me messages. Hey, I saw it's going to rain in Morumbi. You're going there. May God protect you. So he never really called himself a Christian after that, but he showed a side of himself that I didn't know, especially up until the stroke. And my mother always said she was Catholic, not Protestant, but not really practicing, but I didn't really have an example of faith at home, let's say, you know. My mother hasn't read your books yet, but she'll love them. When my grandmother, her mother, passed away, she read a lot about religion, spirituality, but not the Bible. Let's put it that way. She read about the figures, read the historical books. She wanted to understand that. And recently, when we met, I told her, I think you'll like Rodrigo's books. She said, no, I'll look for them, and so on. I have one.
I also brought this photo here.
Uh,
In the line that's very important to you,
I watched, like, the little dog passed away 2 months after my dad. Can you believe it? At 17 years old.
in September 2022. That was my memory. It's good today.
Right? So 2 months, good research. So it wasn't 2 months, it was a little later because my father went in April, so it was a little later.
And in that same year, now I get into another part of the story that I wanted to talk about. That happened, which was also impactful in your life.
The complete opposite? Very, very much.
This is one of the ceremonies.
Yeah, it was Pelé's wake.
It was the wake, it was the wake, it was Pelé's wake at Villa Belmiro.
Yeah, it was a 24-hour wake. I had never been through a situation like that before. And look, I've already covered some remarkable wakes. I know you've covered some really important ones too.
Yeah, Mandela's wake really left a mark on me, and there was another one that impacted me too, James Brown's in New York.
I didn't know that. You saw Michael Jackson's?
I almost forgot to mention Michael Jackson. And Pelé's, how was it? Did it leave an impression on you?
Yeah, I had already done the funeral of Carlos Alberto Torres, Capita from the 1970 World Cup. And recently I did Maguila's funeral too. It's always strange, right, Rodrigo? Because it's a moment of great sadness. And I think that for those who have already lost someone very close, you start to understand the meaning of it much more, right? Of the ceremony.
You lost your father in April, your beloved little dog in September, and Pelé's wake was in December.
And my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, also passed away shortly after, so...
Was 2022 a very significant year for you?
Yes, it was. I got some gray hairs.
Would you say it split your life, split it?
There is one no. I'll leave you without an answer regarding Pelé. But when I was on the trip to finish Luca Normalidade, which was a trip through the Amazon, I was on a hammock journey. And I know we have a hammock moment here. Going from Manaus to Santarém because I was going to Alter do Chão to do a creative retreat. I always heard that writers did that, but I think it must work for writers, not for me. So I got an Airbnb. I needed it. Someone suggested I disconnect from my routine, so I dyed and bleached my hair. At 33 years old, anyone looking from the outside would say, ah, Plácido really lost it.
And when was that?
In 2023, August of 23,
After all these events,
after all this. And then I was taking the boat trip. Yeah, I really wanted to have that moment there of introspection and a lot of writing and stuff. And then I was traveling by boat from Manaus to Santarém, 24 hours lying in a hammock on a ferry boat there, which is a route that people from the region, Amazonas Pará, take often because it's a means of transportation, right, along the Amazon River and without internet. So I thought, man, this is going to be an exercise. Despite my anxiety, I focused on reading and writing as planned, taking notes in a small notebook to imitate Francisco Solano's habit. I used to handwrite notes and thoughts back then because I wanted to process grief. And I read a book at the time that was very striking by a Portuguese writer, also contemporary José Luis Peixoto, called Moreste Me. That book is it's very, very sad, but it's beautiful. It's a poetic take on death about understanding something that was a turning point about understanding. And interestingly, I was on the Amazon River and
Did you find this book by chance, or were you seeking one about death?
I'm very good friends with Tiago Crespo, a journalist from Globo.
Who wrote Write Your Book blurb?
Right, he wrote the blurb. He used to work in sports and is now a culture reporter at Globo in Sao Paulo. And Crespo, he has a unique sensitivity, And he bought this book at an event where he met José Luis Peixoto. And he didn't give it to me when he bought it. He gave it to me sometime later. And when he gave it to me, months after my father passed away, he said, look, I was waiting for the moment when you would be a little more ready. Look how sensitive this guy is.
And really, the book had a big impact on you.
A lot. And there's a quote, I remembered the book when you mentioned the watershed there. Interestingly, in the flow of the Amazon River's waters. When I was reading the book, there was a quote where he said, I walk alone in this world, now cruel. And then the feeling I had a lot during that time of mourning and everything was really that everything became more hostile. Because when you're really suffering a lot, you see everything around you. Nothing has changed, right? But you have changed a lot.
Because there's a now in this sentence that's fundamental. I go on now.
I go on alone now, in this world so cruel.
You said it differently at first. I go on alone in this world now cruel. You said first, yeah.
That's it.
In other words, the world becomes cruel after a certain event in the book.
That's it, because basically this author, he reports his work is there's no fiction. His is really a true account of the experience of his father's illness, about his father's passing.
So is there a lot of similarity with your story?
Yes, well, the book is very deep and he works through some things there that were fundamental, like in my process of understanding. And I felt exactly what that phrase says. I felt that at that moment, at that turning point after my father's death, that you would see, for example, on the street, someone laughing, someone living life in a happy way. It bothered me back then, man, it's not possible. Everything is so gray. Everything is so bad for me. So how is it? They're laughing, that's it, because life goes on, right? The world keeps existing the way it always has. I was the one going through a really tough process and also a lot of reflection. So you start to understand that suffering is lonely, right? It's individual. And I even mentioned that in the book, in one of the reflections. From the moment you understand that emotionally we're alone, that no one else is going to feel your pain, when you choose, you connect more with others and start respecting all kinds of pain. At that time, for example, I was grieving the loss of my father, grandfather, and little dog. Talking to someone, they'd say, yesterday I was really sad because my TV broke and it took me a long time to buy it. But sometimes for that person's context, it was huge, intense grief. The person bought that TV with the sweat of their work, never had a TV that size before, so you can't belittle the pain of losing that TV. And understanding that everyone feels things on their own connects you, right?
Was Pelé an idol to you?
He's a reference, an idol for everyone in sports, right? But he was distant. Interestingly, I can't say which team I support. Sports journalism has these things, right? But my father was a Santos fan, and because of Pelé, because of Pelé's generation. So I've always been interested, a bit more in the stories of...
Why did you reveal your team to me?
Santos is a beloved team, but it's not my favorite team. That's as far as I'll go.
You mentioned one earlier. I combined it with another sentence, not sure why, but it's fine. A beloved team.
Santos is a beloved team, but not my favorite. That's what I can say.
Is it not Santos? It's not. But did that stop your personal mourning from what you said about the broken television? When you arrived at Pele's wake, did you feel distant from that event because you had something bigger happening inside you?
On the contrary, I think I connected a lot to Pelé's wake for a few reasons. The first reason is that everything was still fresh. Not even a year had passed since my father's wake, which interestingly was held in front of the Rey Pelé Training Center. My father passed away in Santos at Santa Casa de Santos, and his wake was at the municipal funeral home across from the Rey Pelé Training Center, where the Santos team trains. And I'm a guy who's really into symbolism, so I kept thinking, God, what a coincidence. You see, I said I'm not a Christian, but I said, my God, the symbolism. I'm agnostic. Sometimes I believe, sometimes I don't. But it's exactly because that pain was so present, so intense right there. Seeing, for example, Pele's family members, Pele's fans crying and everything. I think I was being very respectful. That's how I got through it. It's a daily exercise, to respect other people's pain. So, especially after this whole process, but I think I faced it with more sensitivity.
You drew a parallel with that death, which was important for Brazil, yes.
The death that had been
So important to you, did you draw a parallel between the two?
all the time, I think there I was at various moments less of a journalist in the objective sense of information and all that, and much more about capturing the emotions, right? In fact, this photo specifically is from the wake, right? And during the wake, is this you here? That's exactly right.
I didn't notice it the first time I saw it.
They set it up like it was a pulpit, right? A little desk there for us to do Globo's live broadcasts, and then I was live the whole day during the first part of the wake, right? Because it was a 24-hour wake.
Did someone relieve you so you could handle 24 hours? Did someone take your place exactly?
I started really early, so I covered the opening of the wake. And then there was a shift change around 9 at night, more or less. And then the wake went on through the night. It wasn't me who stayed there, but during the day, I kept going live on Sport TV all the time. I was the only one from the Sport TV broadcast, which aired full time the whole time. I was the only one inside the stadium. There were two commentators, Luis Carlos Jr. and Milton Leite, and there was also a switch. They were in a studio, and there were two other reporters outside the stadium, and with an unstable signal, right? Because it's the live feed, which is the internet signal, so. And mine was a stable signal, and I was inside. So the people from the organization, the coordinators said, Plácido, we count on you all the time, like any perception you have. If someone arrives, call and go live. There are no rules. That's how I remember it. Even the day before, I was very worried about how the coverage would be, and talking to the coordinator, I said this. But how is it? Do you expect my reports to be more informative, more like a narrative? I was in the press room. I was there from the beginning of the coverage. I was in Santos when he passed away. Then the coordinator's answer was quite emblematic. He said, no one has ever covered Pele's death before, so we don't know either. Just go with your feelings and keep talking. The more detailed the reports are, the better it is for us.
He said you were less journalistic and more emotional.
Oh, yes, much more.
Much more that really showed in this image.
Here, this was my first report for Journal Nacional.
People noticed that you were getting involved with Pele's story here.
Ah, yes, that's where the difficulty comes in. You know that well. The timing, right? This was a taped report, a report of, I think, about 1 minute and 45 seconds. The goal of this story, which came up suddenly, was to talk about the impact of Pele's death in Santos, specifically in Santos. And I was at my mother's house in her apartment, which interestingly was just a few meters from Pele's statue. On Canal 5, for those who don't know Santos is divided by 7 canals. And then near Canal 5, there's a statue of Pelé, and I was taking a nap. This story is interesting. On the day before, he passed away on December 29, 2022. And on the day before, we already suspected that Pelé wouldn't last much longer. He was already very weak with colon cancer. And then my boss tells me, look, Plácido, don't turn off your cell phone. Stay on alert because the news could come at any moment. How can you sleep like that? So I slept very little. I left my phone with the sound on, and whenever it beeped, I would check it. Grêmio is getting closer to signing Suarez. I would go back to sleep.
What were the other headlines that came in?
The one about Suarez, it really stuck with me.
WhatsApp message. It had to come from WhatsApp.
Bills to pay, Uber notification, promotion, and
Suddenly, news of Pelé's death came.
no, then I spent the night waking up every hour, I don't know, every half hour, and already feeling tense too. I couldn't sleep well, and the next day I wake up or get up, right? Because I wasn't even sleeping properly. And then I needed to buy a nice jacket because I thought, man, I need to look presentable. My jacket was kind of old.
In case Pelé dies.
In case Pele dies. So I went to a nearby mall and bought one. My mom was always with me when we got back. I said after lunch, like I said, Mom, I need to take a nap. If he passes away, I'll have to work a lot. I didn't sleep at all last night, so I'm going to sleep. Suddenly, my mom comes into the room. Pele died. I said, what? I got up startled. She gave me the news. She was watching TV in the living room, and Globo's breaking news came on. And then she woke me up, and then the head of the news desk called me. Plácido, are you doing the story? The Jornal Nacional story about the reaction in Santos, flight to Villa Belmiro.
News desk chief. It was year end, right?
It was the end of the year?
It was the weekend.
No, it was, I think, a Thursday, but I could be wrong.
But half the people were off.
Exactly. Everyone who was working was on call, but half the team was there. And then the cameraman who was with me was in São Vicente. We were going to meet at Villa Belmiro. And since I lived very close, my mother lived very close to that Pelé statue. I said I wouldn't be able to go to the villa because this was at 3:30 in the afternoon. The Journal National story needed to be done by 7 something. I said I wouldn't have time to go to Villa Belmiro and come back here to get the footage of the statue, so I went straight to the statue. And the people from the bakery across the street, which is Padaria Santista, were raising a flag.
Did you do it with your phone?
I did it with my phone, then I lowered it, framed it right there and all, recorded it. Well, that was already guaranteed. This image is the one that opens the report. Boom. I flew to Villa Belmiro without a suit jacket and told Mom it wasn't ready, even though I'd already been measured. She said, go to Villa Belmiro, I'll get it and bring it to you. So I got to Villa Belmiro and you were, since I went by Uber,
No, I mean about the clothes.
just a plain white t-shirt, nothing special.
And then your mom frantically searching for the jacket.
Really? Then what? When I arrived, a bunch of fans were already outside the stadium, so I started chatting with a few of them. I think I captured much of that emotion since there were fans from various generations. And then my idea was to focus exactly on different generations of Santos fans, to have them talk about Pelé's legacy, and to try to find a local resident there from the Vila area because it's a residential area with many longtime residents. It had to be possible. Someone must have known Pelé or at least talked to him at some point. And there was a lady who, interestingly, had lived in that house in front of the villa for 82 years, which was Pelé's age.
Then I said no.
She said, of course, I'd be happy to talk. Pelé used to stop here at my gate and we would chat after practice. Is that you, ma'am? I just need my cameraman and my jacket.
And this is the jacket right here. And then
My mom showed up yelling with the jacket, I'm here.
I arrived in this situation. Then your mom showed up.
During the search for characters, she showed up. I said, okay, Mom, thanks. In the cameraman's car. But it was a mad rush like that.
And did this coverage change your career? Did it mark your career?
It really left a mark. It's the most relevant coverage of my career. There were certainly other important moments which, interestingly, did not have sports as the main topic, but rather as the background.
For example,
The trial of Oscar Pistorius, the athlete,
what took you to South Africa?
because it was at the time I was in Kenya, through the Passport Project. Sport TV, which was the selection process that got me into Globo, it was a project to be a correspondent at the beginning of my career.
I got the job as a correspondent.
It's luck, but also crazy, right?
Luck and, well, skill, right? Someone had to choose you. So how was it? Was it when you got there and met these people here?
Yeah, that was while filming a report about the women's homeless team from Kenya. And then there was the girls' practice nearby, and their kids, well, not their kids, just children playing soccer near the field where they practiced, like that. And then I saw the kids playing, so I sat down and took a picture with my phone. And then the kids came running over to look at my phone. I'm not sure if they'd seen one before. This was in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. So I grabbed the ball, held it, and turned for a selfie, right? And then the kids started cracking up, laughing, taking selfies like that. And it really left a mark on me during this experience in Kenya. It was 7 months in 2016. I was 26 years old, and as a TV reporter, it was my first experience, so I don't even like to watch those reports, technically speaking.
You filmed yourself?
Yeah, I was a video reporter at that time. I traveled doing everything by myself, and the report was only finalized later. Here in Brazil, they added soundtracks and archive footage, but what truly impacted me was interacting with the children.
Here it's you filming.
Yeah, here I'm filming Edgar. This one was a striker. This Edgar was a striker for Kibera Black Stars. Kibera is the largest slum in the world. It's in Nairobi, and
It's like Soweto in South Africa, Johannesburg, no.
the difference is Kibera, because there the city is very flat, so it's really spread out, right? Different from the communities in Rio, when you see the communities in Kibera, it's something that never ends. Like,
That reminds me of Cité Soleil, there in Haiti too, which is also a huge, flat, enormous slum. For the Brazilian soldiers, getting around was difficult and extremely dangerous at that time. I interrupted you before you could answer. Were the children in Kenya what impacted you most, or was that just one of the most striking things there?
I think that was the most striking thing. I had never put it that way, so objectively. But I even have a tattoo, I can show it, not from that moment. Let's see if it works. It's just that I'm wearing long sleeves, but you can see it here, right? We won't be able to show the beginning, but zoom in Muzungu,
Muzungu?
Muzungu. And it's the gaze of three children because the children were very curious about me during that time. There in Kenya, 99% of the population is black, and their skin tone is much darker than mine. So there they would clearly look at me and see that I was an outsider. And they refer to foreigners as Muzungu, which in Swahili, the main language of Kenya, literally means aimless wanderer.
How interesting.
So in the 18th century, when they were colonized by England, they referred to foreigners as aimless wanderers because people would get lost. They would walk around and end up getting lost. Ah, Muzungu, look at the Muzungu over there. Over time, it became synonymous with foreigner.
They used to call you
Muzungu all the time. And then that tattoo scene, I had just arrived in Kenya. I was at a little field. It's a comic strip, right? I really like comic books too, and here it's me recording. Then the three kids come closer, and this would be my point of view, right? Because they came closer, it was something that really happened. They started touching my arm, Muzungu, Muzungu, with a look of curiosity like that. And then I didn't understand anything. When I got to the car, there was a driver who worked with me, Willis, a Kenyan. So I said, Willis, but why? The children were touching me, shouting, Muzungu? What was that about? He even laughed and said, no, it's because this is a very tight-knit community. We're deep in the outskirts of Nairobi. They don't have contact with people from outside the country. And they were curious to know what the texture of your skin was like. The texture and Muzungu is the term they use. So he explained this whole story to me, and they were touching my skin out of curiosity. That really left a mark on me. That cultural shock, for me, that's the scene that sums it up.
What did Africa change in you?
My perspective, interestingly, about the curiosity in the children's eyes, you know. I started to be, or at least try to be, much more empathetic, much more respectful. It's to always try to understand the stories before having prejudices, you know, to really understand the context of things. For a journalist, that really helps, right?
Did it make you more sensitive?
A lot.
There was a lot of poverty.
There was, but at the same time, that's it. Like, it is very poor. Today, it's been almost 10 years, right? It was in 2016 that I lived there. Yeah, there was a lot of poverty. But then, when you start to understand the context of why they are poor, then you understand a lot more. Like, Kenya's independence is from 63, December 12th, 63. It's very recent, right?
Very recent. What's this photo here?
It's about independence. And actually, I'm next to Ted Kisoy, that guy on the right. We're going up. Mount Kenya is Africa's second highest mountain, located near Kilimanjaro.
Did you make it to the summit?
I'm not that skilled.
You just went with him part way.
We went as far as we could up to the last walkable part. It's on a trail. From there, it would be climbing because it's really a mountain made of rocks like that. So we stopped there and slept in a cabin.
I confess to you that I'm not sure. That's Kenya's flag. It's Kenya's current flag. It's not the independence one, nothing like that. It's the current one. And you guys took the flag up to put it. You were going to put it on the summit. Yeah.
Not here, it was just to illustrate the article. It's because here, interestingly, the dark color is related to the skin color of the Kenyan people. The red represents the blood shed during the independence process. The green refers to nature. The white here stands for peace, which they hope to have with independence. And the shield in the center, it's from the Maasai ethnic group. They're quite famous for jumping. You know, they wear those red garments, live in the savannas, and it's an ethnic group that still preserves their traditions today, like that, with these very characteristic rituals. And that's the origin of the flag. And Ted Kisoy, the one on the right, he's Kisoy's son. Muniel, who was the mountaineer chosen by Queen Elizabeth to plant a flag at the top of the mountain. Kenya on December 12th, 1963, as a symbol of liberation, as a symbol of Kenyan independence. And then I went with him. At the time, I discovered this story and all, and I was working for Sport TV.
Oh, it was to tell this story about independence.
So I said, hey, can we relate independence to mountaineering? Sports in some way were connected to independence. Kenyan?
It must have been a good story.
Yeah, it was, but it was exhausting since I wasn't dressed right. I had on twill pants and was totally unprepared. Rodrigo. Yeah, I went there thinking I was just going to record a stand-up. For those who don't know, a stand-up is when the reporter appears on camera, recording. So I was worried about that. Wearing pants that were totally out of place.
What pants should you have worn?
Oh, trekking pants, right?
Workout pants, actually.
And we slept in a cabin inside the complex.
It's in the backpack.
It's there. I recorded the interview with Ted Kisoy, already more or less in this final part, which was as far as we could go without actually climbing, right? He's also a mountaineer. His father, who was the mountaineer that planted the flag as a gesture of liberation, has already passed away.
And he climbed up. He managed to get up there.
No, he didn't even go.
He didn't go.
We just went there to get some footage for him to show me. He was telling me some stories. And then later we slept in the cabin. Then we ate some instant noodles at night. He was heating up some water.
How do you say instant noodles in Kenya?
Instant noodles is, I don't know.
And this report here, Davido, or David, as you say, Rudisha, is...
David, Rudisha.
Rudisha is.
In Swahili, they do this Rudisha.
They also make those sounds just like in South Africa, right? No.
No, in Ethiopia they do. They do.
Right? You went to Ethiopia. Did you travel throughout Africa too?
I did. I went to 3 countries. Yeah, Africa. I went to Kenya, South Africa, and Ethiopia. This other tattoo is in Amharic, which is the Ethiopian language. It means health.
Which means evolution. Evolution. But it's such a big word just to say evolution. 2 words.
Now, don't ask me how to say it in Amharic. What's the pronunciation, right?
Now, before we get to England, which I also want to go to, I wanted to ask, did you talk about the tattoos?
Oh, no, I was just explaining. David Rudisha at the time was like their Neymar. Interestingly, their most popular sport. The most popular sport in Kenya is athletics, right? It's practiced specifically in the countryside in a region of the country. This city is called Eton. In Nairobi, people don't really care about athletics. They like English soccer and they have good runners, and David Rudisha was the big star, you know.
Why are they such good runners? Were you able to explain it? Ethiopians used to win everything. Then it was the Kenyans. Any explanation?
There are a few factors, right? I even tried to do some reports about it. The secret of the runners. Basically, the conclusion we come to after analyzing everything is that there is a culture of athletics. So there, especially in that region of the country, which is the Rift Valley, right? Which is really deep inland. It's a high altitude area, 2,600 meters, almost 3,000 in some cities. So there would already be this lung issue, right?
It's already hard to run there when he runs
It gets easier.
at sea level.
There's that. There's the issue of discipline, which for me is the main thing, precisely because of this culture. In this city, I understand the gateway to the city. Every day at 5 in the morning, there's a group of 80 to 100 runners there to train every day at 5 in the morning. And their diet, theirs, they eat a lot of carbohydrates and little protein. Interestingly, they don't eat much red meat, just once or twice a week.
Is that an athlete's choice or is it the local culture?
Local culture? Meat, usually, protein is protein. Usually it's fish and carbohydrates. They eat a dish called ugali.
Ugali?
Ugali is cornmeal and water. And then it gets hard like this, and for them, it's like their basic dish. It would be like our rice and beans, right? So on a daily basis, what they eat is ugali. with sauteed vegetables and sometimes a fish. And you eat it with your hand, and it's good. You take the ugali. I used to add some salt, and they would get mad.
It's different. What else did you learn in Kenya about culture, about differences like that?
Man, I learned a few words, but I didn't get to the point of learning any curse words.
You learned?
No, but the truck driver taught me. I hitchhiked with him. This story is actually pretty funny, but the truck driver taught me the blessed phrase, Nataka Bibi.
Natacha Bibi.
Do you have any idea what that means?
It can't be anything good.
It's not good, is it? Or maybe it is. It could be good, but it's nonsense, right? I want a wife. Oh, yeah, he taught me that during a ride I had to hitch with the truck driver. To sum up the story, we were on our way. I was with Willis, my driver. We were leaving Nairobi and heading to Mombasa, which is an important port city in East Africa. And it was a report we were going to do in Kilifi, an hour from Mombasa, about a project called Moving the Goalposts, which won an international award, the Laureus. They helped through women's soccer. Laureus is, the award is, which is the name of the building.
It's the name of the building.
It's the building's name. It was intentional. And then the idea of the story, we were going to Kilifi to tell it. This project that, through women's soccer, wanted to raise awareness among the women in that region, right? To empower themselves, to build their skills. And then it had won this international award. We pitched the story to Sport TV, they agreed, and it became my first report for Esporte Espectacular. My first appearance on Globo was this story, because at the time the project was really just for Sport TV. It was rare for us to get into other places at Globo, right? So I was going to Mombasa with Willis, my driver, and he was using an automatic car. There was some problem with the transmission during the trip, and we got stuck on the road. 2 hours from Mombasa, it started to rain. Rodrigo and I was thinking we were counting on getting to Kilifi during the day. And then it was about, it's a tropical paradise there, Indian Ocean, crystal clear.
With the car stopped on the road.
Stopped, it's raining. And then Willis made some calls in Swahili, nobody answered. And then he said, we're going to have to hitch a ride with someone here, a tow truck. Then I asked, what do you mean no? We needed help, so we waved at truck drivers in the rain, trying to get one to stop. A truck driver stopped and said he would help, but he didn't have the steel cable to hook it up. And then he said, oh, I'm not in a hurry to get there. In Mombasa, which is a port city, so a lot of trucks go to that area. He waited on the shoulder, a truck driver.
He stood there waiting.
And I didn't understand anything. Because they were talking a lot in Swahili, which still has two main languages, right? English and Swahili, but among themselves they speak Swahili. Then suddenly another truck driver stopped. He had the steel cable and said, I can't stay here waiting for you. No, we have that other guy over there who already volunteered. He left it with us. We tied it up there.
But they bought this steel cable.
He donated it. The guy donated it. But this collective sense is very curious. That was one of the lessons there too. They help each other a lot, especially, and there's also a bit of the issue of exploiting foreigners, asking for bribes. Sometimes that's a bad thing, like from colonization, a bad remnant, because as they say, they were very exploited, right? Sometimes when they spot a Muzungu, if you ask for some information or something like that, they'll say, oh, I'll help you, but you have to buy me a soda over there. But when they feel that you're already part of the local community, then it's a total sense of collective help. So they put the steel cable there and got a tow. But to balance the weight and not overload the car, I went with the truck driver to Mombasa. And then he taught me this phrase, Nataka Bibi.
That's what it was for.
That trip was amazing. The experience was good.
Is it curiosity? Is it a coincidence that you went to be a correspondent in a former British colony after living in England? No, it wasn't a coincidence. No.
No, I had already been a graduate for 3 years. Basically, when I was about 2 years out of college, when I went to Manchester, I went on my own, just like you did.
On an adventure?
It's because this process, this project, right, the Sport TV Passport, it was really emblematic for my generation. It doesn't exist anymore. It used to happen every 2 years in World Cup and Olympic years. In the previous year, they would open applications to hire young, newly graduated journalists to be correspondents. In 2013, my first year after graduating, I studied journalism at PUC Campinas and graduated in 2012. In 2013, my first year, I tried for the Sport TV Passport and didn't pass the English interview, and that stuck with me. And up until the World Cup in Brazil, I had a YouTube channel and a blog to talk about soccer, but I was working in general journalism. I was a TV producer. And then that kept bothering me like, damn, I need to try living abroad to improve my English and work on a project that will give me the credentials to come back and try for the program again. The application period lasted up to 3 years after graduation. So I said, well, until 2015, I still have a chance. The World Cup ended, and I managed to work at the World Cup for a print newspaper from Campinas, which was like Folha de São Paulo or Estadão, but from Campinas called Correio Popular. It's kind of strange to say that nowadays, right? I used to watch the newspaper being printed at the press, and I thought that scene was beautiful. Like, now I'm a journalist, I thought. And then after the World Cup, I had some money saved up and managed to convince my parents that I needed a certain amount.
I was going to ask, since living in England is expensive.
It's not cheap, but it was cheaper back then. Today, it's almost impossible. So I convinced my parents that, hey, I need 6 months, I have this much, I need this much, and it's going to be worth it. I'm going to do my best. I'll study English, and I'll create content independently. When I come back, I'll be able to get into the program.
You bought a camera?
I bought a camera. I actually already had the camera because of the YouTube channel. So I went to study English and I produced content for 442, which was my blog. And then there was a YouTube channel. Was it a precursor or was it Desimpedidos? If I had continued, maybe I would be a successful entrepreneur. And then there I started sending those reports I made already in a format different from TV, trying to do something a little different. I used to send these videos to Julio Castelo Branco. He has been a correspondent for ESPN Brazil for many years, son of José Trajano. So I used to send them to João Castelo Branco because he liked the reports. Then one day he went to Manchester and he lives in London. And then he said, look, I can't afford to pay you a salary. Sometimes I need a second camera since he's also a video reporter. So depending on the opportunity, would you be up for it if I buy you lunch, get you a press pass? I said, sure, I'm here for the experience, right? And then I started helping João from time to time. And through him, I started writing a blog about Manchester United for ESPN's website. It was called Dia Blog Vermelho, about Manchester United. And then the project I really wanted to do to come back, because I said, if I just come back now, if I speak English, I won't get hired. I need to have another project, solid, And then when I saw it, there was a lot of text, blog for ESPN from my blog. And then the idea for Passion, a journey through English football came up. So a good part of the work had already been done. I just needed to adapt it to write. Yeah.
It was already on the blog.
I needed to adapt it a little bit. So I was going to stay for 6 months. And I asked my parents for 2 more months. I said, I need 2 more months. I swear I don't even need to take the English course anymore. I just need a little money just to take a few specific trips now for sure, for specific texts for the book.
But it was an economical stay there. You didn't spend much money on housing, lunch.
Cheap. Yeah, at the time, I only bought things off the shelf, out of date, about to expire, really about to go bad, just to save as much as possible. I lived in a kind of boarding house.
I ate expired food.
No, it was about to expire, but I bought them. I loved buying Scottish prawns, the Scottish shrimp, which were always about to expire. I used to freeze them raw. Yeah, I bought them raw and froze them almost expiring. I stocked up, but then I bought it really cheap. I paid £2 for 400 grams of shrimp, and it was great, wonderful. And then I got it cheap, stocked it there, and then housing. I got a room in a boarding house with about 5 people. It was a shared bathroom and kitchen, right? And then the room itself was private, and it was £200 at the time, which was a little over 1,000 rees, like
Scottish shrimp.
prawns, Scottish prawns.
You gave me an idea. I want to invite you to go to the kitchen with me to eat something. Come on, second act. Let's go.
Let's go, so let's go.
We're going to sing here now.
Very beautiful.
Let's eat something. Come on.
The problem is that I eat a lot, but hey, that won't be a problem.
The problem is that people who come here don't eat. There's some jelly.
I don't stand on ceremony. Rodrigo?
Do it. No, don't do it. Don't you want to have a glass of wine?
I'll have one, please. I'm gonna try this salami.
Here we go. Excuse me. Here's the thing. I only bring Brazilian wine, Brazilian cheese. Everything is Brazilian. Not even French wine gets in here. Because there's a lot of good Brazilian wine, right? We're at a really good stage. Funny, we were talking about Brazilian writers. We've had many before, but I think we're in a good moment now. There could be more, sure, but it's already a good moment.
About the wine issue as well, right?
About wine, I think we've managed to develop in several sectors.
Developing.
We weren't developing before. It seemed like there was a certain shyness that this isn't something from Brazil making good wine, but today we do some things, for example, good cheeses. Brazilians have today.
Paraphrasing Nelson Rodriguez once again, we're losing the mongrel complex. Maybe.
Maybe, right? Maybe, I think so. We still have a lot of imitation, right? We see imitation in politics. We see imitation in so many aspects, right? Yes, but there are others where we're becoming more authentic. I think so. That's the impression I get.
That's because the cool thing about Brazil, culturally speaking, is exactly the mix, right? We have a lot of influences, right? And if we know how to value that, we've got everything we need. We have a country full of highlights. Thank you.
When did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
It was kind of by chance, you know? Cheers.
Cheers to our meeting. The first was on the soccer field and the second here.
With terrible plays, but with a lot of fun. It was a good day, right?
It was really good.
It was fun at Pacaembu.
Starting at Pacaembu wasn't bad, right?
You can't imagine.
When it is, did you notice Pacaembu?
Actually, it was my thesis documentary, Pacaembu, Pacaembu, Playing Without Mercy.
I saw something about that. I saw it.
Pacaembu is an important stadium in my life, and fortunately, we met there.
Do you have a previous connection with Pacaembu? Is that why you were invited, or was it because you're a sports journalist and they invited you?
It was mostly the second reason. I have a connection with Pacaembu after my thesis and at other times. For Globo, I do stories related to the stadium because people know about my background, so I've already done a series of reports for Esporte Espectacular at the time of the demolition of the toboggan, which was that attached stand. When we played, there's that structure behind one of the goals. That's the toboggan.
Don't you remember? Could it be different?
It was an annex. It wasn't part of the original project. The original project of Pacaembu is on the south side of the stadium. There's the facade on the south side. There was an acoustic shell in the original project. Then later, over time, that acoustic shell was demolished and they built this other bleacher, which was straight like this. More recently, after the concessionaire took over, they demolished the toboggan, which was controversial at the time since nostalgic people opposed it due to memories. And now they're building that multi-purpose complex. It's going to be a kind of mall, hotel, restaurant.
Bookstore there too, right? Yes? Do you want sparkling water or still water?
Sparkling is fine. Rodrigo, please. But then answering your question about writing. By chance, I think it wasn't something very planned. I had the plan to be a sports journalist.
That was my first decision, to become a sports journalist, not a writer.
No.
Because mine was the opposite. I wanted to be a writer. And I said, but how am I going to become a writer if I don't even know what I'm going to say?
Thank you. And usually, historically, there's this thing about journalists sometimes transitioning, isn't there?
I remember, you see some big names like Garcia Marquez, you see several others. I can't remember them all now, but there are many, yes. And I said no. Maybe the best way to write a book is to start with journalism. Then later I got there somehow. I didn't know how, but I made it. And you were the opposite. You wanted to be a sports journalist.
You wanted to be a sports journalist?
Not as a frustrated soccer player.
Many sports journalists, in fact, are like that. That's why we like it so much, because soccer and sports are very passionate, right? I've even said this once, and it was controversial. What is it like at a bar table with friends, sports journalists?
Please, you serve. Go ahead.
Thank you.
That I still hold.
In a way, a bit of your opinion, but back then I was more outspoken, I was younger, and that to be a really good sports journalist. At some point, you need to have felt the passion of being a fan or an athlete too, right? You need to have felt that passion. Because basically, unlike general journalism, objectivity and accuracy in the facts, sometimes that's not the most important thing. That's the most important logic.
You have to get emotional with the...
You have to get emotional. You need to convey emotion. And to convey emotion, I think if you've already felt it, it makes it a lot easier, right? So I think the vast majority of sports journalists have felt that at some point, you know? They've already been fans, they've already been passionate, they've already wanted to be a player for Corinthians
What for Palmeiras?
for a few days.
So, when did you have that moment when you thought, wait, I want to write a book, or I have something to tell in a book?
So, interestingly, the habit of reading also came after college. I used to read a lot before.
Didn't college get you to read?
No, I read very little. Unfortunately, or fortunately, right? I was going to say unfortunately, but it's all part of the process. But I went to the bar more than the library. And I read a lot of comic books, especially when I was a kid and a teenager. I really like detective stories and mysteries. And in college, I lived in a shared house. I lived with several friends. At one point, there were 12 of us.
You were away from your parents who were in Santos.
They were in São Carlos. São Carlos, yeah, Santos. They went there after they retired, right? And then I went to Campinas to study, and there I lived with several friends. I ended up living in a house of 12, so I didn't have time to read, right? Maybe I could have had time, but I chose to hang out with friends, have barbecues, and play video games. And when I had to focus, it was to study, right, for college. When I graduated, I left, and then I went to Poços de Caldas. In 2013, I lived there for a while, and that's when I started reading a lot. Then there, I think I got back a bit of the essence I had learned from my parents at home. Then I thought, man, I could have started earlier. I could have picked up this habit before. But back then, I didn't even think about writing a book. I think the blog started to bring me that pleasure of writing. And then, like I said, in England, it ended up leading to that, but it wasn't planned.
First, there was a non-fiction book, which was natural, right? More natural for a journalist, a non-fiction book. How did the transition to fiction happen?
This cheese here is really tasty, actually. It's good.
Right.
Really good. So, for fiction, I think it came exactly from that desire to be able to talk about things that maybe I wouldn't have the courage to say if I were talking about myself. That's where the story of camouflage comes in. But being able to mix in some imaginary elements, let's say, even for myself, so I could have the courage to let it out. I think that's kind of what it was.
A device. At first, the idea of fiction was just that, but you really liked it and decided to keep going.
I really like what I do on TV, and I plan to keep doing it for many, many years to come. But I already have a very well established plan for the perfect final years, which is to live in a very quiet place and write a lot, somehow feel what I felt. Alter do Chão, writing Louca Normalidade in the final stretch, right there.
But the book, was part of it written there or all of it?
No, not all of it. About 30%, around 20-30%.
Like the final parts, yes.
I managed to really hyperfocus.
How wonderful.
When I arrived in Alter do Chão, I stayed there for 15 days. I set a routine for myself to wake up, have breakfast, and work. Basically, to write from 8 in the morning until about 2 in the afternoon. I would write straight through, stop, have some coffee, then go back to writing. And in the afternoon, I would go to the river beaches. In fact, Alter do Chão is the most beautiful place I've ever been to in Brazil. You know it by name.
No, which one? The Paraguay River?
Tapajos is beautiful. You arrive in Santarém by the Amazon River, but then Alter do Chão itself, which is right by the district, right? Yeah, the Tapajos River. It's very hot. The only problem is that it's very, very hot, hotter than your Rio de Janeiro.
Hotter, right?
In the middle of the afternoon, like around 3 o'clock, there's no way you can walk around.
Because it's humid too, right?
It's humid. You sweat a lot. But then, during the day, in the afternoon, when I stopped writing, I would go have lunch, stop at a little river beach and just read. Also to bring a bit of inspiration and so on. At that time, I read Rafael Montes' book because I was in the final part of my book, which is more about the investigation. So I needed some kind of language reference, a real thriller.
But do you think you can see the reference there? I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
You think it's more discreet, right? Not visible?
Yeah, right. You notice it.
More about language? It's because, for me, the philosophical question and the reflections I was having were very clear, where I wanted to get to. But this part of the background, which was the mystery of the note and everything, I really needed some inspiration for that. And I felt like I was going in a much heavier direction. And I said, man, if I just go in that direction, it won't make much sense. With the beginning of the story, I need to have some cohesion to build up the mystery, the investigation, and all that. And then there I read Rafael Montes, that final part. But then, as things go, I read Morestimi. During the journey, the trip until I got to Alter du Chão, it's an extremely profound book.
You were reading and writing simultaneously, right?
And also had a beer or two. No one is invincible. I also bathed in the river.
Listen, let me talk about that.
And that's how I met my girlfriend.
Back there in Alto do Chão.
One after I finished writing the book.
Is she from there or was she traveling?
She's from Sao Paulo. She was traveling too. We met while hiking in Flona, the Tapajós National Forest. Gienia, a kiss, Gienia.
Giania, and she was traveling alone. She's a writer.
Also an economist, and I failed economics in college.
So she's going to take care of your finances.
Please.
I wanted to ask you, we have a lot of travel stories about tough times. You mentioned a little bit earlier, but tell us some of your stories from your journeys around the world. In Kenya, in England, you ran out of money. You couldn't get there. You told the story about the truck. Were there any others? Yeah.
There were several, but while I think about it, I want to ask you, what was the...
Are you going to interview me?
Can I ask a question?
You can ask whenever you want.
It's actually nice for us to say this, and it's not just empty words. When I started with this idea of living abroad and everything, my role model for a correspondent was you.
Seriously.
I really, really, really liked it, and I still do, right? But you're not there anymore, but I really loved your work in Jerusalem. And I also liked the aesthetic you brought to the reports and the way you conducted them in a light, natural way, which I really see in Rodrigo Carvalho these days.
My friend, a great friend.
I already really like the two Rodrigos. I'm Plácido Rodrigo, by the way. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
And I liked that. At the time, your stories, I noticed, and I always wanted to ask you this, that the images in your reports were more cinematic. They had a different texture, like a DSLR camera, right? Yeah, it was a photographic lens.
It was a fight to get to use those lenses.
But that's how it was, right?
That's how it was, but we pushed it. I pushed it a bit because I started in Sao Paulo and the whole technical team argued with me. Yeah, nobody used those cameras, nobody did, and I saw some demos of those cameras on the internet. I was amazed it could film without light. Filming without light is a dream. Because my main concern, and you can see it here in our show, is non-interference. I don't want to tell my interviewee that I'm recording, he'll know, but I don't want to keep reminding him all the time.
Because you get more defensive, right?
So I started adopting some procedures to take away the discomfort of my presence. I wanted to be less intrusive in that context. So, for example, I stopped using a microphone, what's called a handheld microphone. Because I thought the gesture of doing this was aggressive. I even compared it to a punch you throw. Look at the movement, how it resembles it, right? It's a bit too strong. Me taking the floor and giving the floor also gives me a power that I didn't want to have. I wanted our conversation to be a bit more balanced. I didn't want to have the right to take away someone's turn to speak whenever I wanted. I didn't want to have to turn on a light so the person could talk to me. I wanted to use the light from their house, from whatever environment I was in. And the more modern cameras, the smaller ones, still cameras, they read the light better. So I started to realize that it helped me do better interviews, more interesting reports. And there was also this factor you mentioned that aesthetically it was more cinematic.
But how curious at the time you went to Jerusalem, which was in 2013.
2013. That's when you started in England.
After graduating, I spent a year in Poços de Caldas, then moved to England in 2014. Back in 2013, just after graduating, you were paying close attention to everything and searching for references, right? I remember your reports on Jornal Nacional very well, especially those. And I found your way of conducting things, like you're saying now, interesting, because that's exactly what came across, a more natural, more organic way of leading. And the image was very beautiful, I used to say. This image isn't like the others.
Yeah, there's a difference in texture, because the television camera is made to read a lot more information. The still camera, it forces you to select more of what you want to show, right?
It has a greater blur depth.
It's much harder to focus with a still camera. It demands more from the photographer. That was a job. I brought in a television photographer, but it took us some time for him to adapt and start getting good. The way you think it turned out well, but at first it wasn't. The first report was terrible because he had a television habit of tight framing, zooming in, zooming out, and I didn't want that. No, stop it.
He was Brazilian?
No, he was English, a Brit, Israeli, so yeah. That's all. I wanted to eliminate all the television elements because, in my view, television had become addicted to steering the reporting toward what it expected from the report. I wanted the report to lead me. I wanted to be guided by things and not to guide them myself.
Not to arrive with an agenda.
So not arriving means no, the most open agenda possible. And that's how it was, and it started to work. Now, when you're in the middle of a conflict, a lot of things also happen. Then the Gaza war happened and everything keeps happening. There were also many reports on religious themes, which is visually very interesting. You enter a church that has light and shadow all the time, with smoke, with incense. So all of this contributed to the aesthetic concept. It turned out like this, which is cool, but what you're seeing here is more or less the same concept. You see the idea of not having interference. You came in here, we already started recording right away. Yes, the idea is not to keep reminding all the time, oh, there's a camera, do this, look here.
You're recording, man.
So, but it's good to know that there was something positive for you.
And the question was Jerusalem the period that marked you the most?
I have no doubt my life is divided into before and after Jerusalem. It was 4 very, very intense years of personal transformation, of knowledge, of understanding what the world is, of understanding that extremely complex region, the Middle East, but mainly of truly understanding the world. I immersed myself in Christian history, which is the history of our civilization, in large part, because I went to study Christianity to understand myself. We come from a Christian culture. Even if you're an atheist, if you're Brazilian, Italian, Spanish, or Portuguese, your culture is Christian.
The initial values, like my first communion photo, are Christian.
That's it. That's what you deal with when you're born. That's the story we're presented with. So in some way, the Christian story is our story as a people. Unlike Judaism, where the story is about the Jewish people themselves. But we are embraced by this story. We embrace this story from the day we are born because it is presented to us as our own story. So in some way, I wanted to study this as well. So Jerusalem changed me completely. It made me understand who I am and what our existence is, what our world today is, in a much deeper way. And not because of divine matters, but because of human matters. I'm talking, but I want to hear you.
And that's exactly the aspect my mother was interested in, like I told you. About religious readings in a certain way, but also about historical figures, understanding the historical process. It's interesting.
And that's also the reason that leads me to literature. My interest in humanity is very strong. In the human being, it's very strong. And we find answers, we find questions. Sometimes the questions are better than the answers. You find it in literature, you find it in religion, you find it a lot in the history of different periods of humanity. When I start getting into this, and you're also searching to understand, sometimes the story of a single man reveals a lot about us, about our surroundings, and about other people as well. That's why we identify with your book. You also tell the story of a man, but you're also talking about our story too, in other ways. You're talking about what touches us, about issues that affect us, and that's what makes good literature a good piece of art.
Thank you, but that's all. Everyone has a father, good or bad. Bye.
You have a tattoo of your father?
I do. It's his signature, and I had never thought about it before. His handwriting was very fine, very delicate. Pedrinho was his nickname in the story. Francisco Solano is sometimes called Chiquinho.
Pedrinho is so infinite, you know.
The tattoo artist who brought me this understanding of infinity, I had never thought about that before. Bye.
And down there, that little curve, that little hook, what is H? It's the H. Is that why you wanted to get this tattoo?
Because I've always really liked his handwriting. And it also has everything to do with literature. This signature here, it's on the dedication of a gift he gave me when I was a child, which was a dictionary. It was my first dictionary. And then he wrote, "To my son Plácido, this little dictionary, to help with the readings that give meaning to the world."
How symbolic is this gift?
And in the end, he signed it, so I took a picture of that signature and got it tattooed.
It's recent.
I did it 2 or 3 months after he passed away.
Doesn't your mother get jealous?
She said she would do it, but she still hasn't gotten the tattoo.
But about you being so close to your father.
She must be talking about it a bit in therapy.
But how did it start? This?
It was when I was really little, from the relationship between him and me. Ah, yes, like I said, for a long time he was my best friend, very much in that sense of being my companion in imagination. So, there was a story, and I've told this to very few people throughout my life. When I was a child, I liked those things, heroes, adventures, and then I had a daydream when I was really young. I'm not sure how old I was, but probably around 4 or 5. Sometimes I would put on a mask. I had a double mask. I cut off the tips of the horns, of the ears right there. And I would just put on that part, put on a hat, and I looked kind of like Zorro. And then I would say I was Captain Thunder. I would play around the house like that, running back and forth, Captain Thunder and all that. And my dad would go along with it. And then I thought I was fooling my parents, that I would leave the room in costume. Oh, now I'm fooling them. Tricking them.
Tricking them, like being Captain Thunder.
In my childish mind. At that moment, they believed it, and especially my dad really went along with it, like I was Captain Thunder. And then, out of nowhere, I would go to my room, change, come back, and act like nothing happened. And then my dad would play along like, "Hey, son, where were you?" Then I'd be like, "Oh, I fooled my dad." So he was really a partner in these games. And even in soccer, he was really bad. But we had a backyard with a lawn, even on a slope. And I would play soccer, just me and him, messing around. He would go in goal. He was a terrible goalkeeper. And I would kick the ball, always aiming at a green mailbox that was there. I scored a free kick goal because one day I practiced.
You with him.
I practiced on the wall at my house. But we had a very close relationship with my mother, and we've always been very close, very close. But it's curious. My mother has always been, for me, the example of the most normal person, the most down-to-earth person, the person who gets things done. With my father, I didn't have personal conversations. When I started dating for the first time, or when I had a question about which course I was going to take, that was always my mother. It was always my mother.
Mother was the rational one.
She was always the rational one, my mother. She also has a playful side, but she's much more the rational one in the story. And the pragmatism in the sense of let's get things done and let's be assertive in our choices. So she was and still is fundamental in decision making and in the more everyday conversations, let's put it that way. My father was the guy who would talk about things that apparently didn't matter, not at all.
Reason was Fatima, and Pedro was the sensitivity of it all. It was interesting to have these two so different at home as formative elements.
Yes.
Not everyone has that opportunity.
I find it curious that they thrived as a couple because it's really, like you said, they have very different personalities.
You just haven't told me yet. Among the travel mishaps, there's a good one.
I made all this preamble to remember some interesting story. During the time in Kenya, there was one time during the Kenyan athletics trials for the 2016 Rio Olympics. For the first time, it happened in Eldoret, which is a neighboring city, and it's also part of this region of the Rift Valley in Kenya, where the runners train. They are based in that area. For the first time, the athletics trials would take place there, so it was historic. It was really mobilizing Kenya, that trial. Because for them, it's like soccer in terms of pride, the expectation of winning and all that.
Is it always a marathon, or are there other events too?
They're more long-distance runners, right? David Rudisha, interestingly, he wasn't a long-distance runner. He was 800 meters, if I'm not mistaken, 400.
Long-distance runners?
Go long distance. It's long distance. There's 10 kilometers, a half marathon. And the Kenyans win by a mile like this or run away with it. There's this tradition, and for the first time, it would be in Eldoret, making it historic. I went there to cover it alone as a video reporter, and then the whole international press was there. There was a space there on the athletics track, and that day, the athletics trials weren't for the long distance runners, they were for the shorter distances. And then the people were always there inside the stadium. And then there was a slope, like which would be the bleachers, separated by a wire fence with all the fans there cheering and shouting a lot and everything. I said I wanted to be Marcio Canuto and go into the crowd, not stay in the controlled area. Security wouldn't even let me approach the slope. I explained it would be quick, just a recording, showed my credentials, and they let me through alone. They told me to return quickly, or others would want to go through too. No, it's fine. I went, I got through, set up the camera there. Everyone was coming over. No, this is quick and all. Boom, I recorded it. For the first time, the athletics trials are happening in Eldoret, in the land of runners, da. I did the segment, and I left there with that adrenaline, you know? I said, wow, that segment turned out amazing. For the report, I did what I had to do, interviewed everyone and all that. I arrived at the hotel planning to edit and send the report to Brazil. The audio from my segment wasn't picked up by the handheld microphone. It was only picked up by the camera.
The audio, it was terrible there.
It was terrible. It couldn't be used. I said, damn, I didn't record it. Another option, I'll have to dub this here. And then I started dubbing in my room, doing different intonations of the words. And then I started putting together
Word by word.
different intonations. I read the same text straight through, then reread it with different intonations each time. And then during editing, I started putting it together like a puzzle to try to make it look more like the lip movements. And I added a BG, which is the background noise, right?
From that crowd?
I edited it there, sent it to my friend from the Passport Project. Did you do a test?
I'll test it.
I sent it to Julia Guimarães, now a global sports correspondent in Madrid. I sent it to Julia and said, hey, Julia, what did you think of this? So I didn't say anything. Look, did it turn out well there?
You asked about the audio.
I didn't send it saying I need to see if it goes through. I sent it and asked, what did you think? She said, it turned out good. Wow, how was it? The crowd is excited. You didn't notice anything, so no one else will notice. I sent it. It went on air. No one said anything.
Is someone going to find out about this now?
Probably the boss.
From that time is going to find out about this.
Soon. He will. What was the report? The athletics tryouts in Eldoret 2016 were dubbed.
Who was the boss?
Marcelo França. He was my boss, the head of the international sports desk. At the time, the story went to Sport TV News.
Can you hear the phone?
I've seen your show and knew it was coming.
The phone always rings, man. You know what's interesting? I'll answer it now, Carlos. It's just that someone always calls out of nowhere. Someone I don't even know. Can I answer it?
Sure, go ahead.
Hello? Chief of Correspondence, that's right. Is it with me or with him? All right, I know. I'm not active anymore. It's okay. What do you want to discuss with Plácido? Are you enjoying it? This is a cool interview. I'm enjoying it too. He shared some amazing things here. I got to know him better. In 20 years, but how is that relevant? Look, man, the guy who's introducing himself as the head of the correspondence, do you know him? He was asking you to do a live broadcast. Here's a report on what's happening in your life right now. He says you can use the elements of the set here if you want, so that in 20 years people will know what was going on inside you. On that day, you agree, right? Can I tell him that you agree?
Sure, it's the boss. You have to respect the boss.
He said he's going to do it. All right, you want to keep listening? I'll leave the phone here just for you to listen, so you'll keep listening here, okay?
It's about my life?
It's about my moment. How do you portray a message that you're going to send for 20 years from now? So that people will know in 20 years. But you can do it in a live format, tell where you are. This time, man, you don't have time to explain.
If you mess up, you can't record again.
Don't make mistakes. Everything counts because it's live. I can. Whenever you're ready, just let me know if you need some time.
Let's improvise and see what happens.
Do you want to create a script?
No, let's see what comes out.
The key is to send a message to those who hear you 20 years from now.
20 years?
What's going on with you today? How are you feeling today? You talked a lot about your father. We talked about your book, your profession. You have a girlfriend. All these elements, whatever you want to bring up, you don't have to bring them all up. That's not it. Look, man, he's here listening. That's what he wants.
That's the boss, huh?
So do you want me to do a 3, 2, 1?
Go 3, 2, 1 on TV. We always do the 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1 over to you. Go ahead.
Everyone who's watching us in 20 years, in 2046, Plácido is talking about what Plácido is feeling, and we're here in an area that Plácido really likes, which is the kitchen. Plácido always feels more comfortable where there's food and a good drink. I need to confess that in 2025, I said 2046. I already made a mistake, actually. But since I don't have the right to edit in 2025, 2025, Plácido was anxious the day before for this interview because he would be interviewed by an icon who is Rodrigo Alvarez.
You'll feature me on your live in 20 years. I'm in your message. Let's go back.
The camera is coming over here. So Plácido was anxious for this interview. He was very happy to meet Rodrigo at Pacaembu, which is an important stadium for me, and for Plácido, who is the character to be mentioned in this live broadcast. This meeting was very symbolic, and the invitation made me curious. Because besides journalism, we are also talking a lot about books, about literature, which is something that is increasingly winning over the heart of the one speaking to you. And who knows, maybe in 20 years there will be other books already published, more stories to be told.
The guy wants to know what's in you.
And at that moment,
That's it, right? Okay?
I am proud. Proud to be able to speak openly about topics that for a long time were kept so hidden and that shouldn't be seen with shame, but with pride.
All right. Great. Do you want to talk to him?
Tell my boss something. I got the year wrong. Look, see, boss, I made a mistake. I said 2046. I've always been bad at math, right?
Boss, today you won't need to cut anything, okay? Everything he said here in the heat of the moment counts, all right? So that's it. Thank you, okay? See you.
You're not going to fire me.
Right. He's going to promote you.
Hey,
But when in 2046, oh no.
still a year later than what should be 20.
No, that was me. It wasn't him who said that. No, that year was, he just said he would promote. He didn't say when. Look, after that, I only have one thing to tell you. Let's go to the third act.
Let's go to the third act. One last.
One last toast, one last toast. Toast. Your head to this side, to the back. The idea is really to take off your shoes, lie down and relax.
You know, I love the hammock. I just moved into an apartment where I'll be able to put a little hammock in a nice spot on the balcony, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Man, I highly recommend it. It changes your life, right? It does. We've talked sitting down, we've talked standing up and lying down, but you can be sure the conversation is different. And the idea here is for us not to look at each other, but to look inside ourselves and not outside, which is something we forget to do in our daily lives, right? Everyday life doesn't allow it. The routine is tough, right? It always makes you look outside. Even more so when we're always looking at our phones or people are on the ground calling on the phone.
Tough times, right? Connected to the phone, to social media.
Difficult. You know, I resisted, as I recall, in 2006, I think, there started to be pressure for us to have a BlackBerry, which was the cell phone. Remember the cell phone that had
A bunch of...
keys. You could write emails, and I said, man, but I really don't want to write emails while I'm on the move to have to deal with that. It took me a while. There's a day when you say there's no way around it, and by then I was already in. I used the BlackBerry for a little while. Then smartphones came out and there was no turning back. But if I could go back, I would go for what the ultra-Orthodox Jews call a kosher phone. What is that, a kosher phone? It's a pure phone, which fits within Jewish law. It doesn't have internet, so you don't have access to pornography. You don't have access to news all the time. A kosher phone is just for calls. It's the StarTAC, the old button phone, again with buttons.
It's because it will really serve its primary function, right?
Which was? For that? Of course, it's good to have several things. You have banking, a credit card. It's even hard to think about how to live without it today. But I feel a certain nostalgia. Actually, I'm a nostalgic person. Are you nostalgic?
I'm very nostalgic, very nostalgic.
What makes you feel nostalgic?
I think it's actually curious because I'm paradoxical in that way. I'm very nostalgic, but I adapt very easily to new situations and places, which is theoretically the opposite, right? People who are nostalgic usually have a hard time getting attached to new things.
But I also moved a lot and adapted a lot, but I'm nostalgic. I'm quite nostalgic.
You start to remember the old times as if they were really good, right?
Exactly. Yes, the past is always better. I miss every place I've ever lived.
I miss them a lot, some more, some less, even the ones I didn't like that much. For example, I'm not saying I didn't like it, but it was a tough time for me. For example, Pozos de Caldas. When I graduated, like I said, I lived in a shared house with several friends.
It was a mess, a real mess.
A mess, always joking around, always there, a carefree life, you know? And suddenly I went to Pozos de Caldas to work as a television producer. In a region that didn't necessarily have a lot of news and with a lot of professional responsibility to produce 2 stories a day. In a region where I didn't know anyone in a pre-social media era, interestingly enough. At that time, I already had Facebook, but there was no WhatsApp.
What year was that?
2013. So my job there as a producer was to call people.
Shortly before I arrived in England.
That's where I decided to become a sports journalist.
Even Pozos de Caldas, no way, I want to leave.
I didn't want to be a general assignment reporter. Nothing against it. I respect it a lot. In fact, I came to respect it even more. At that time, for example, I was in a rural area, so I produced a lot. Stories about the price variations of potatoes, onions.
There must have been a cream cheese story at least once.
You did it. I did. About mozzarella, about buffalo cheese.
For me, it's cream cheese.
But can you believe I used to live there? But I covered actually 13 cities in the state of Sao Paulo that were on the border. Oh, okay. Which made the job even harder because I lived in the state.
You in the state of Sao Paulo?
Right? Yeah, I lived in a state that I didn't cover, okay? And then everything was by phone because there was no WhatsApp, so I needed a subject who would complain about the rising price of potatoes. I would call a supermarket that I found on the internet, on Google searching. I would call and ask, do you have any customers? Someone who always goes there, who's complaining about the price of potatoes? Oh, there's Mrs. Maria here. She comes by every now and then. Wow, can you get her phone number? I'll call you back in a couple of hours. I'll check if she's interested. No, I really need this. 2 hours later, I'd get her home number and call people on their landlines. It's a completely different world.
And why don't you have good memories from that time?
I think it was really because of the pressure. It was a period of a lot of shock, about what the professional world was really like. In contrast with what Plácido the dreamer had romanticized, had imagined about the profession, I stayed in the newsroom all the time. Today, for example, as a reporter, what I like the most is being out on the street. And at that moment, I started realizing that I didn't like being locked up in the office all day. I would arrive at 7 in the morning and sometimes leave at 8 at night because I couldn't get any stories, then go home already worrying about finding a story for the next day. I couldn't relax at home and living alone in contrast to life with friends. So it was a difficult phase and one of a lot of maturing, I think. Also forced, It wasn't a pleasant phase. But today,
remembering it even makes me a bit nostalgic.
I feel a certain nostalgia for the place I like to eat, for the conversations I had. In fact, today, my great mentor in literature, whom I met during that time, is Jessica Balbino.
She was from the TV station there?
She was a journalist at G1, and she actually covered Pozos de Caldas. We used to share a table, and even back then, she was already a specialist in, or was starting to specialize in marginal literature from the outskirts, right? And, for example, the last time I met with Balbino was now at Flip.
What makes you feel nostalgic, or where does your nostalgia come from?
I feel nostalgic for a time when I saw life a bit more colorful, in the sense of being more idealistic. Maybe that's the word. I think that over time, things happened in a way that made me understand that life is just the way it is, that there is suffering, there is pain, That many times life isn't fair. That many times, most of the time, almost always, right? It's not fair. Whether in our daily lives, in politics, or in geopolitical decisions. And I think that for a long time I was very much a dreamer, even in the sense that no, this is very beautiful, this is very cool, because I lived a life without many problems. I consider myself privileged in that aspect. So,
A well-adjusted family.
a very solid foundation, a family that wasn't wealthy. My parents were public servants, they worked at universities. My father was at USP, my mother was at UFSCar, which is the Federal University of São Carlos. But I had a good situation. Being an only child, I probably had privileges I wouldn't have had if I had siblings, right? And I've always been a guy who had good friends. I was lucky to have good friends, nice people, close relationships, and I managed to work with what I liked. So I think that for a long time, life was really good, you know,
You're talking about childhood, adolescence, and even
the beginning of adulthood. And then I think there comes a moment when you start having to face the harshness of the world, right? Which in the end is how it really is. Like, I feel this more and more, and this has a lot to do with our mental health as well. You know, that the world is actually in our heads, right? Yeah.
I think it's all an illusion, or it's what we imagine it to be.
You know, in this whole thing of researching a lot about existentialism, about philosophy in general, right? I ended up really identifying with existentialism. Among other philosophical schools, the one I identified with the most was existentialism, which basically says that nothing really has meaning except for the meaning we give to things. And I kind of go by that principle. I think I live my days in a way that's similar to that, just like understanding that nothing is as important as we think it is. Nothing is that serious, that grave. Because in a way, like you said, it could all be an illusion. In some way, it sounds like crazy talk. But what we understand as normal, as different, as cool, as boring, as fun, as tedious, everything. They're all ideas created by a collective or sometimes even by an individual who then passes it on. But they're just ideas, right? We live according to ideas, and ideas, they're abstract, aren't they? It's not an exact science, so we live through a meaning that was passed on to us that we collectively understood as the meaning of life, so to speak. But that will vary from person to person, right? For someone, it will make a lot of sense to live in the countryside. For someone else, it will make a lot of sense to live in a big city. For some, having a family and children makes sense. For others, traveling the world and visiting every country possible does.
Of the material options, of the material matters that we are all interested in, which ones do we have to deal with? What are those questions that drive you, those existential questions that move you?
Look, when I came back from Kenya, I had a certain existential crisis in a way. Because for me, it was really what I always dreamed of, you know, which was working with soccer, with sports, and all that. It was my dream to be a sports journalist. And when I came back from Kenya, having seen so many things that showed me what the world is really like, you know, that thing about broadening your perspective, right? When I came back to Brazil, I worked in Rio de Janeiro from 2017 to 2020. And there, in fact, I was living my dream. I was working as a daily sports reporter, covering games at Maracanã, interviewing soccer idols. And at first, I thought all of that was very superficial, all very meaningless. After coming back from Kenya, that's what it was. I had climbed Mount Kenya with the son of the Independence Day mountaineer. And that story had to do with the process of colonization by England, which made a people suffer. And it also left some seeds there which today make them happy as well, like, for example, their passion for soccer. It was all very conflicting, and I returned feeling conflicted.
But also very fulfilled.
Deeply fulfilled, which makes the situation even more conflicting. And then, for quite a while, Rodrigo, it took me some time to feel pleasure, let's say, covering what I always wanted to cover, which was soccer.
It left an emptiness.
It left an existential emptiness. And then, after thinking a lot, and at the time I wasn't in therapy yet, I started to understand. And then a lot of it was really feedback from the audience or interviewing people and feeling their joy. There, for example, at Maracana on a sunny day, on a Sunday, that was really important for them. And to understand, starting from this existentialist principle, that nothing really has meaning except for the meaning we give to things. For many people, liking soccer, watching the sports journalists talk about it, that's what gives meaning to their day. Understanding this gave meaning back to my profession, to what I do. That's when I realized again that okay, this here, I'm not talking about the war between Israel and Hamas. But this here is very important to a lot of people, and I need to be responsible and also value that. And little by little, I started to have fun again. Maybe not like Plácido at 15 would have, but today I go to a packed stadium and I can get into it.
How do you deal today with the memories of your father's schizophrenia?
It's not something I think about every day, to be honest. Yeah. I think it's still a bit of a taboo for me in some way. Talking about it openly is still a challenge. But, like I said, it's liberating in a way. And I think that Luca Normalidade, I even put this in dedication sometimes, it's a story about liberation.
This book is a liberation for you.
For sure, for sure.
About your father's story and everything it involved.
Did it set you free or lead me on the path to freedom? Maybe I'll only be free at the end of the journey, but I think it leads me to a path at least of more acceptance, more compassion, more empathy, and less judgment.
What exactly do you need to free yourself from?
I think from pressure for normality by the expectations others have about who we are. I think that actually everyone has their own story, everyone has their own context. There's no right or wrong. Even today, I really believe like you have to do what makes you feel good as long as what makes you feel good doesn't harm anyone else. If you're not hurting anyone and if it makes you feel good, then do it. And I think my sense of meaning today and of purpose really goes in that direction. Like doing things that are good for me without hurting anyone and trying to find something good for myself that also does good for others. Hey, that even rhymed. It sounded like a folk poem.
I like rhymes. And where do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? In 15 years, you'll be exactly the age I am today. What do you want to be doing?
If I had the answer, I would be more at ease. I'm pretty restless. Like I told you at the beginning of our conversation, I'm an anxious guy. So I'm always thinking about different scenarios and trying to imagine, since I also have this vivid imagination. So I try to imagine how things could be. And I have a bit of difficulty mapping out the end right now. I already know it's in a quiet place writing, the path to get there. I feel like there will be a lot of tests, a lot, especially thinking about the professional side, you know? Many opportunities and paths in my personal life.
Also professionally, is it on television that you want to be in 15 years?
We don't know if television will be the same in 15 years, probably not, right? So I want to be part of these processes of change. I want to experiment. I already take some risks from time to time doing some things on the internet to bring a bit of a more natural language, like we said, less robotic, to television. I think the way forward is this path of naturalness, of getting closer. And I want to keep communicating. I think that in 15 years, I intend to keep communicating no matter how or what the subject is. Soccer will always be present, just like in Luca Normalidade, it is discreetly present there. The protagonist, a die-hard Bangu fan, has a chapter that takes place at the Moça Bonita Stadium, which was the first stadium where I did a soccer broadcast.
Wow, that's cool.
Everything has a reason there.
Bangu is where the textile factory used to be.
Yes.
There's a song by Noel Rosa, Bangu has its own charm.
It has charm and good roast chicken.
And you think you'll still be there even though there's no merit, it's just because of the passage of time. You'll still be a reporter 15 years from now, no matter what outlet you're with.
I think the essence of being a reporter will always be with me. You may agree with me or not, but I think you tend to agree.
Yes.
For those who have been reporters, it's hard to leave that 100% behind. This thing about building someone else's story, listening to others, getting to know a place you didn't know before, the dynamism of the street, of you going back and forth. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily have to follow a specific pattern to use the tools of reporting. Exploring places and people to tell stories can lead you down different paths. I truly see myself as a storyteller for the rest of my life. How they will be told and what they will be about, I think.
And in what form? Whether it will be in books, whether it will be in reporting.
Whether it will be in reels, whether it will be on an interview channel.
Or whatever is invented which we don't know exactly.
I hope it's done by humans.
I only accept it if it's done by humans. I rarely check, but I looked at the clock to see how long we've been talking because I wanted to do some math. Because you told me that you're used to obviously asking questions and not answering them. You've been talking about yourself for over 2 hours.
Man.
I hope it was good for you. A good experience. I loved being here with you, man. I loved getting to know you better. I got to know you quickly, but I have this trait that when I identify someone I like, I see it right away. That's what happened when I met you.
Hey, that's great.
I'm glad you came here. Thank you.
During a warm-up for a game at Pacaembu, it ended 2-2, and we were rivals, actually.
We were rivals. You were on the team.
White, and I was on the black team, 2-2.
Thank you.
I'm the one who's grateful.
And more success to you, to us. Congratulations on the book.
To us, thank you, thank you.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm just not seeing it now because it's over. There's no more. I'm not seeing you now.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.